The dust cloud rose 300 feet into the Afghan sky, marking the impact point where the Black Hawk had gone down. Captain Maya Reeves pressed her body flat against the compound wall, feeling the ancient mud brick crumble slightly under her tactical vest. The sun had turned the Helmand province wasteland into a furnace, and sweat tracked through the dust caked on her face. Through her rifle scope, she counted 12 hostiles, maybe 15. They were moving toward the crash site with the confident stride of men who believed they owned this particular piece of hell. They were wrong. Maya keyed her radio. "Viper 6 to all elements. I have visual on the crash site. 2 souls on board, status unknown. Multiple hostiles converging. We need to move now." The voice that crackled back belonged to Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a barrel-chested operator who had been killing bad guys since before Maya was born. "Viper 6, that's a lot of guns for a 4-man team. Recommend we wait for QRF. Quick Reaction Force. 45 minutes out. Might as well be 45 years. Maya's jaw tightened. The 2 pilots in that downed bird were running out of time they didn't have. She'd lost people before, good people. She wasn't about to lose 2 more while playing it safe. "Negative, Viper 4. We're moving in 30 seconds. I'll take the north approach. Rodriguez, you and Martinez flank east. Thompson, you're with me. Acknowledge." A pause. Then Rodriguez's voice came back, resigned but professional. "Roger that, 6. We're moving." Maya allowed herself the ghost of a smile. Rodriguez didn't like taking orders from a captain young enough to be his daughter, especially one who stood 5'2" in her combat boots and looked like she belonged in a college library, not a kill zone. But he followed her orders because in 18 months of operations, she'd never lost a man. She planned to keep that record intact. The assault lasted 4 minutes. Maya moved like water, flowing from cover to cover with the M4 carbine tucked tight against her shoulder. Her first shot dropped a hostile at 300 meters. Clean headshot. The second caught a gunman emerging from behind a burnt-out truck. Center mass, double tap. By the time Rodriguez and his element hit the compound from the east, Maya had already cleared the north wall and was moving toward the crash site. A hostile appeared in a doorway to her left, AK-47 rising. Maya pivoted, her body moving on instinct, honed through 10,000 hours of training. 2 rounds. The man dropped. She reached the helicopter 4 minutes after the assault began. Both pilots were alive, bloodied, but breathing. The younger one looked up at her with eyes glazed from shock. He saw a small woman in dust-covered fatigues, and his brain clearly struggled to process what he was seeing. "Ma'am, are you rescue?" Maya pulled a pressure bandage from her kit and started working on his leg wound. "That's affirmative. Stay still. You're going home today." Rodriguez appeared at her shoulder, breathing hard. He looked at the 3 bodies Maya had dropped, then at her, then back at the bodies. After 18 months, he still seemed surprised every time. "Hell of a thing, Captain," he said quietly. Maya finished the bandage. "Let's get them to the extract point. We've got 5 minutes before this place gets hot again." The extraction went smooth. The pilots were loaded onto the rescue bird within 10 minutes. As the helicopter lifted off, Rodriguez came to stand beside Maya. They watched the dust clouds swirl and dissipate in the rotor wash. "You know," Rodriguez said, not looking at her, "my daughter's about your age, smart as hell, went to Princeton, but when I look at you—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Maya glanced at him. "What do you see, Sergeant?" "Same thing those pilots saw. Someone too small, too young, too—" He gestured vaguely. "Female?" Rodriguez had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I'm just saying, Captain. First time I met you, I thought it was some kind of joke, some Pentagon diversity initiative gone wrong. 6 months later, you'd saved my ass twice." Maya studied the horizon where the helicopter had disappeared. "And yet here we are, Sergeant. You're alive. I'm alive. Those pilots are alive. Maybe what you think doesn't matter as much as what I do." "Yes, ma'am." Rodriguez shifted his weight. For what it's worth, ma'am, you're the best officer I've ever served under, and I've served under a lot of them. Before Maya could respond, her radio crackled. Different frequency this time. Encrypted channel reserved for command. Viper 6, this is Olympus Actual. We need you back at base. Immediate recall. Maya frowned. Immediate recalls during active operations were rare. Usually meant something big was happening. Or something bad. Olympus Actual, Viper 6 copies. What's the situation? Classified, Captain. Just get your team back to base. You have new orders waiting. The transmission ended. Maya looked at Rodriguez, who had heard the entire exchange on his own radio. He raised an eyebrow. Guess Princeton's calling you home, Captain. Maya looked back at the compound, at the bodies of the men who had tried to kill those pilots, at the bloodstains in the dirt that would be gone by tomorrow, washed away by wind and time and the relentless Afghan sun. She'd been deployed for 14 months. Before that, it was Yemen. Before that, Syria. She'd spent the last 6 years of her life in places most Americans couldn't find on a map, doing things most Americans would never know about. And she was tired. Bone tired. Soul tired. But if there were new orders waiting, it meant someone, somewhere, needed her to do one more impossible thing. Let's move out, she said. I've got a feeling this recall isn't good news. Rodriguez grinned. With respect, ma'am, when is it ever? The C-130 transport plane that carried Maya and her team back to Bagram Airfield rattled like a paint mixer filled with loose bolts. She spent the flight reading the classified folder that had been waiting for her at the forward operating base. What she read made her jaw tighten. Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Special Forces Assessment and Selection Center. 2 candidates dead in the last training cycle, both ruled accidental, both under suspicious circumstances. Someone at JSOC thought the accidents weren't accidents at all. Someone thought there was a saboteur in the instructor ranks. And someone had decided that Captain Maya Reeves was exactly the right person to find them. The briefing document was clear about method. She would go undercover. No rank insignia. No identification beyond what a regular candidate would carry. She would submit herself to the same grueling assessment that every Special Forces hopeful endured. And she would watch, listen, observe which instructors played by the rules and which ones might be willing to kill to prove a point. The document included photos of the 2 dead candidates. Both were women. Both were exceptionally qualified on paper. Both had died in training accidents that the official reports attributed to equipment failure or candidate error. Maya studied their faces for a long time. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, 24 years old, West Point graduate, airborne qualified, fluent in Mandarin and Arabic. Found at the bottom of a cliff during night navigation training. Official cause, fell while attempting to retrieve checkpoint marker positioned too close to unstable edge. Specialist Amanda Rodriguez, 26, prior enlisted infantry, expert marksman, 2 deployments to Iraq, died from complications after a ruck march when her pack straps failed and she fell, striking her head on rocks. Official cause, equipment failure, candidate error in not reporting damaged gear. They looked young, determined. They looked like they'd believed the Army's promise that if you were good enough, strong enough, dedicated enough, you could earn your place among the elite. They'd been wrong. Maya closed the folder and stared out the small porthole window at the mountains below. Somewhere down there, people were trying to kill each other over lines on a map that had been redrawn 1,000 times and would be redrawn 1,000 times more. And back home, in the heart of American military excellence, someone was killing the very people who volunteered to defend those lines. She thought about her father, Master Sergeant James Reeves, 75th Ranger Regiment, killed in action in Mogadishu, 1993. Maya had been 6 years old. She remembered him in pieces, the smell of gun oil in boot polish, the rough calluses on his hands when he picked her up, The way he'd looked in his dress uniform at her kindergarten graduation, standing at attention in the back of the room because he'd flown straight from Fort Benning and hadn't had time to change. She remembered her mother telling her that Daddy wasn't coming home, that he'd died doing something important, something brave. She remembered deciding, at 6 years old, that she would be just like him. 22 years later, she was a captain in Delta Force, with more combat missions than most operators saw in a full career. She'd proven herself in every hellhole and hotspot the War on Terror had to offer. But she knew what would happen when she walked onto that Fort Bragg training ground without her rank or her records or her reputation. They would see a little girl playing soldier. They always did. Fort Bragg, North Carolina, looked like every military installation Maya had ever seen. Identical buildings arranged in identical rows. Parade grounds cut to geometric precision. Everything painted the same shade of industrial beige that seemed to be the military's favorite color. The Special Forces Assessment and Selection Center sat at the edge of the base, a sprawling complex of obstacle courses, training ranges, and barracks that had broken thousands of hopeful candidates over the years. Maya stood at the processing station with 39 other candidates. They came in all shapes and sizes, but most shared certain characteristics: male, fit, confident to the point of arrogance. She was the only woman in the group, and she was, by a significant margin, the smallest person present. The candidate next to her was a corn-fed monster who looked like he bench-pressed pickup trucks for fun. He glanced down at Maya, did a double take, and grinned. "You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart? Admin building's about a mile that way." Maya didn't respond. She'd learned early in her career that engaging with every idiot who underestimated her was a waste of energy. Better to let her performance do the talking. The processing sergeant worked his way down the line, checking paperwork and assigning bunk numbers. When he reached Maya, he paused, frowned, checked his roster again. "You Reeves?" "Yes, Sergeant." He looked her up and down with the expression of a man who just discovered his car had a flat tire. "This is Special Forces assessment, not basic training. You understand that?" "Yes, Sergeant." "You understand that the washout rate is over 70%? That candidates tougher and bigger than you have quit before lunch on day one?" "I understand, Sergeant." He shook his head. "Your funeral. Bunk 42. Formation at 0500. Don't be late." Maya took her paperwork and moved toward the barracks. Behind her, she heard the processing sergeant mutter to his assistant, "What the hell is the Army thinking? That little girl's gonna get herself killed." The barracks were standard military issue. Rows of bunk beds, footlockers, fluorescent lights that hummed like angry wasps. Maya found her assigned bunk and started unpacking her gear with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. The corn-fed giant from the processing line claimed the bunk next to hers. He was still grinning. "Name's Hendricks, Airborne Infantry. You?" "Reeves." "Yeah, I got that part. What's your background? ROTC? National Guard?" Maya folded a t-shirt with precise corners. "Does it matter?" "Just making conversation. Gonna be here a while together. Might as well be friendly." He paused. "Look, no offense, but you seem kinda small for this. Special Forces is serious business. Combat operations, heavy rucking. You sure you're up for it?" Maya looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't being malicious. He genuinely seemed concerned, in the same way you'd be concerned watching a kitten try to fight a Rottweiler. "I appreciate your concern," she said quietly, "but I'll be fine." Hendricks shrugged. "Your call. Just saying, there's no shame in realizing this isn't for you. Better to figure that out now than when you're 10 miles into a ruck march with 80 pounds on your back." Maya finished unpacking and sat on her bunk. Through the window, she could see the obstacle course. Walls to climb, ditches to cross, barriers designed to break the weak and forge the strong. She'd run courses like that in her sleep, had done them in full combat loadout in 100-degree heat in places where failure meant death, not just elimination from a training program. But Hendricks didn't know that. The processing sergeant didn't know that. None of the instructors waiting to evaluate her tomorrow morning knew that. They saw what they expected to see. A small woman who probably couldn't do 5 pull-ups, let alone survive one of the most demanding selection courses in the U.S. military. Maya lay back on her bunk and closed her eyes. Tomorrow morning, the real test would begin. Not the physical challenges, she could handle those, but the psychological warfare of being constantly underestimated, constantly doubted, constantly written off as a diversity checkbox who didn't belong. She thought about the 2 dead candidates, Lieutenant Chen, Specialist Rodriguez, about whatever instructor had decided they weren't worthy of surviving the selection process, about the promise she'd made to herself when she'd read their files, that she would find whoever killed them, and she would make sure they never killed again. Sleep came slowly. When it did, she dreamed of her father, of the last time she'd seen him before he deployed to Somalia. He'd knelt down to her eye level, his dress uniform crisp and perfect, and he'd said something she'd carried with her ever since. Maya, the world's gonna try to tell you what you can't do, especially because you're small, especially because you're a girl. Don't ever let them. You show them what you can do, and then you do it again and again until they have no choice but to see you for who you really are. She'd asked him who he really was. A soldier? A ranger? He'd smiled and touched her cheek with one calloused hand. A warrior, baby girl. That's all that matters. Not size, not gender. Just the will to stand when others fall. 3 months later, he was dead, shot down in the streets of Mogadishu, trying to rescue fellow soldiers. Maya woke at 04:30, 15 minutes before her alarm. The barracks were still dark. Around her, candidates were beginning to stir. Hendricks snored like a chainsaw. She dressed quickly, laced her boots with the muscle memory of 22 years, checked her gear one final time. At 0500 precisely, she stood in formation with the other 39 candidates. The morning air was cool and damp, carrying the smell of cut grass and diesel fuel. A figure emerged from the instructor building. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, Maya could tell he was big. 6'2", maybe 6'3", shoulders like a linebacker. He moved with the rolling gait of a man who'd spent decades carrying heavy loads over difficult terrain. When he reached the formation, the floodlights kicked on. Maya got her first clear look at Master Sergeant Cole Brennan. He was maybe 48, with a face carved from granite and weathered by sun and wind and time. His eyes were the pale blue of a winter sky, and they swept across the formation with the assessing gaze of a predator cataloging prey. When those eyes landed on Maya, they stopped, narrowed. Brennan's jaw clenched. He walked directly to her, stopped 2 feet away, and looked down. The height difference was almost comical. She barely came up to his chest. "What in the name of holy hell are you supposed to be?" Brennan's voice was gravel and broken glass. Maya kept her eyes forward, her posture perfect. "Candidate, Master Sergeant." "You a candidate? Or did somebody's daughter wander onto the wrong part of base?" A few candidates snickered. Maya remained silent. Brennan circled her slowly, like a shark examining a wounded seal. "I've been running candidates through this course for 12 years. You know how many women have made it through?" "No, Master Sergeant." 3. Out of maybe 40 who tried. 3. And every single one of them was bigger and tougher than you. He stopped in front of her again. "You weigh about 110 pounds soaking wet. You think you can carry an 80-pound ruck for 12 miles? You think you can drag a 200-pound casualty out of a kill zone?" "Yes, Master Sergeant. You think, but you don't know. Because you've never done it." Brennan's voice dropped lower. "This isn't a game, little girl. Special Forces operators die in places you can't pronounce, doing things you can't imagine. We don't have time for social experiments or diversity quotas. We need warriors. You understand what a warrior is?" Maya's jaw tightened fractionally. She understood better than this jackass ever would. "Yes, Master Sergeant." Brennan stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head and moved back to address the full formation. "Listen up, candidates. I don't care what your drill sergeants told you. I don't care what your buddies think. This is the hardest military training program in the world. 70% of you will quit. Another 20% will get injured and dropped. The remaining 10% might, just might, have what it takes to call yourself Special Forces." He gestured toward the obstacle course visible in the growing light. "For the next 6 weeks, we're going to test every aspect of your physical and mental capabilities. We're going to push you past what you think are your limits. And when you think you can't go any further, we're going to push you some more." Brennan's eyes found Maya again. "Some of you won't make it past today. That's fine. Better to learn now that you're not cut out for this than to learn in combat when lives depend on you." He checked his watch. "You've got 15 minutes to hit the latrine and fill your canteens. Then we're moving out for a little 12-mile run. Just to warm up. Dismissed." The formation broke. Candidates hurried toward the barracks. Hendricks fell into step beside Maya. "That guy's a real piece of work," he muttered. "Don't let him get in your head." Maya said nothing. She was thinking about Brennan's words, about the edge of something in his voice when he talked about women in Special Forces. Not just skepticism, something darker, something personal. She thought about the 2 dead candidates, both women, both killed in accidents. Was Brennan the saboteur, or just a symptom of a larger problem? She'd find out. But first she had to survive the next 12 miles. As the candidates dispersed, Maya caught movement from the observation tower. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the dawn light, older, moving with careful precision. She couldn't make out details, but something about the way he carried himself sparked recognition. Before she could process it further, the figure turned and disappeared into the building. Maya filed the observation away and headed to fill her canteen. The real test was about to begin. The 12-mile run was a lie. It was actually 14 miles, and it included a water crossing and 3 separate hills that qualified as small mountains. Maya settled into a steady pace, her breathing controlled and rhythmic. Around her, candidates spread out according to their fitness levels. The front runners were the young bucks, the ones who needed to prove they were fastest and strongest. Maya ran in the middle of the pack, not trying to show off, just maintaining the kind of pace she could hold all day if necessary. By mile 5, candidates were starting to struggle. She could hear labored breathing, the occasional curse as someone twisted an ankle or cramped up. By mile 8, 3 candidates had fallen out. Instructors in vehicles collected them, their selection over before it had really begun. Maya's legs burned. Her lungs felt like they were being scraped with sandpaper. But she'd felt worse, had run farther in worse conditions while carrying more weight. She thought about a night mission in Yemen, 20 miles through mountain terrain with 70 pounds of gear. Her team had been compromised halfway through, and what should have been a tactical movement had turned into a fighting retreat. She'd made it. Every man on her team had made it. Compared to that, this was a morning jog. At mile 12, Brennan's vehicle pulled alongside the formation. He leaned out the window, studying the candidates. When he saw Maya still running strong, his expression darkened. "Reeves," he barked, "pick up the pace. This isn't a social club." Maya increased her speed slightly, just enough to satisfy the order, not enough to burn herself out. Brennan's vehicle pulled ahead, but she could feel his eyes on her in the rearview mirror. The run ended at the base of a hill, grandly titled Agony. Candidates staggered to a halt, hands on knees, gasping for air. Maya stopped running but kept moving, walking in small circles to keep her muscles from cramping. Brennan climbed out of his vehicle and surveyed the candidates. "Congratulations, you can run. That's basic. A good bird dog can run. The question is, can you perform when running isn't enough?" He gestured to a pile of rucksacks. 80 pounds, pre-packed. You'll carry them up Agony and back down. 3 hours. Anyone who doesn't make it goes home. Get your ruck and move out. Candidates scrambled for the rucksacks. Maya shouldered hers, adjusting the straps to distribute the weight properly. The ruck was heavy but manageable. She'd carried worse. As she adjusted her shoulder straps, she noticed one felt loose. Strange. These rucks were military issue, carefully maintained. Straps didn't just work themselves loose. She checked the fastening. The stitching looked frayed, not from age or wear, from something else. The fibers had been cut partway through, weakened deliberately. Maya's eyes narrowed. She glanced around. Brennan was watching her from across the formation, his expression unreadable. She marked the observation in her mind and started up the hill. Agony earned its name. The trail was steep, rocky, and seemed to get worse with every step. Candidates grunted and cursed and sweated through their uniforms. Maya climbed steadily, one foot in front of the other, breathing controlled, eyes on the trail. At mile 3, disaster struck. Her left shoulder strap gave way with a sharp snap. The ruck shifted violently, throwing off her balance. She stumbled, caught herself, but the weight distribution was now completely wrong. The ruck dragged on her right shoulder, the left side bouncing freely. Around her, candidates kept climbing. No one stopped to help. That wasn't how selection worked. You succeeded or failed on your own merit. Maya stopped, assessed the situation. The strap had torn completely through at the stitching point. Not from stress, the cut fibers confirmed what she'd suspected. Sabotage. She looked up the trail. Brennan's vehicle was parked at the summit, a tiny speck in the distance. She was 3 miles up with a broken ruck, and 3 miles still to go. Quitting would be easy. Reasonable, even. Equipment failure wasn't her fault. But Maya didn't quit. Ever. She dropped the ruck and opened it. Inside, along with the weighted plates, she found what she was looking for. Every candidate was required to carry 550 paracord as part of their standard kit. Maya pulled out 50 feet of cord. Her hands moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who jury-rigged broken equipment in combat zones where the nearest supply depot was 1,000 miles away and failure meant death. She fashioned a replacement strap using the paracord, threading it through the ruck's metal rings and creating a harness that would distribute weight across both shoulders. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't comfortable, but it would work. The repair took 8 minutes. 8 minutes she couldn't afford to lose. But when she shouldered the ruck again, the weight was manageable. She started climbing. By the time she reached the summit, she'd passed 7 candidates who'd given up and were trudging back down. Brennan stood at the top, checking off names on a clipboard. When he saw Maya, his eyebrows rose fractionally. "Strap broke, Reeves?" "Yes, Master Sergeant." "And yet here you are." "Yes, Master Sergeant." He walked around her, examining the paracord repair. His expression was unreadable. "Resourceful, I'll give you that." Maya said nothing. Brennan checked his watch. "You've got 90 minutes to get back down. Think you can make it with that field expedient strap?" "Yes, Master Sergeant." "Then move out." Maya started down the mountain. Her shoulders ached from the uneven weight distribution during the climb. Her legs trembled with fatigue, but she moved steadily, placing each foot with care on the rocky trail. She finished in 2 hours and 47 minutes. Not the fastest time, but well within the limit. 13 candidates had already quit. Another 5 failed to make the time limit. Brennan checked her off his list without comment, but Maya saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or frustration that his sabotage hadn't worked. She couldn't prove anything, not yet, but the seed of certainty was growing in her mind. Brennan was involved in this somehow. Whether he was the saboteur or just complicit, she didn't know, but she was going to find out. That evening, Maya sat on her bunk cleaning her boots. The barracks had thinned out considerably. 18 candidates remained from the original 40. Hendricks was still there, though he walked like a man who'd aged 30 years in one day. He collapsed onto his bunk with a groan. Jesus Christ, he muttered. I've done Ranger School, Airborne School, Air Assault. This is worse than all of them combined. Maya worked boot polish into the leather with small, circular motions. It's supposed to be. That Brennan guy is a psychopath. You see the way he looked at you? Like he wanted you to fail. I noticed. Hendricks sat up, wincing. Your ruck strap broke, right? I saw you repairing it. Equipment failure. That's bullshit. These rucks are inspected. Straps don't just break. He lowered his voice. You think someone sabotaged it? Maya didn't answer, but her silence was answer enough. Hendricks whistled low. That's illegal. That's criminal. You should report it. To who? I have no proof. Just a broken strap that could have been worn through naturally. But you don't think it was? No, I don't. Hendricks looked at her with new eyes. Not the condescending concern from earlier, something closer to respect. You didn't quit, though. Even with a sabotaged ruck, you finished. That's hardcore. Maya buffed her boots to a mirror shine. Quitting isn't an option for me. Why? What makes this so important? Most people would have said screw it and gone home. Maya thought about her father, about the promise she'd made to his memory, about Lieutenant Chen and Specialist Rodriguez, whose files were locked in her footlocker. Because someone has to stand, she said quietly. When everything else falls apart, someone has to stay standing. That's what warriors do. Hendricks was quiet for a long moment. You talk like someone who's seen combat. But you're what, 27? 28? Unless you were deployed straight out of basic. Maya finished with her boots and set them aside. Get some sleep, Hendricks. Tomorrow's going to be worse than today. How could it possibly be worse? Maya lay back on her bunk and closed her eyes. Trust me, it always gets worse before it gets better. Outside, the sun was setting. Somewhere in the instructor building, Brennan was planning tomorrow's challenges. Maybe planning another accident, another equipment failure, another candidate who wouldn't go home. Maya's hands curled into fists. She'd been underestimated her entire life. By drill sergeants who thought she was too small, by fellow soldiers who thought she was too female, by commanders who thought she was a diversity hire more concerned with politics than performance. She'd proven every single one of them wrong. Brennan would be no different. Tomorrow she'd face whatever challenges he threw at her, and the day after, and the day after that. And when the time came, when she had proof of what he'd done, she'd make sure justice was served. Not for herself, for Lieutenant Sarah Chen and Specialist Amanda Rodriguez, who'd paid the ultimate price for someone else's prejudice. For her father, who'd taught her that warriors stand when others fall. And for every candidate who would come after her, who deserved to be judged on their merit, not their gender or size or appearance. Maya closed her eyes and let sleep take her. Tomorrow the real test would begin. Dawn broke over Fort Bragg with a kind of crystal clarity that promised a beautiful day for everyone except the candidates about to face weapons qualification. Maya stood in line at the armory, watching the sky turn from purple to pink to the hard blue of a Carolina morning. 18 candidates had started the day. By breakfast, they were down to 16. 2 had packed their bags during the night, ghosts who'd slipped away rather than face another round of Brennan's carefully orchestrated hell. The remaining candidates looked like survivors of a natural disaster, faces drawn with exhaustion, eyes hollow from too little sleep and too much pain. Hendricks had developed a limp he tried to hide, but couldn't quite manage. A candidate named Williams had wrapped both ankles in athletic tape so thick it looked like he was wearing casts. Maya felt every one of her 28 years. Her shoulders bore deep purple bruises from the rucksack. Her feet had blisters on top of blisters. But she moved with the same fluid efficiency she'd shown on day one. Because pain was just information, and information could be ignored. The armory sergeant was a weathered staff sergeant who'd probably been issuing weapons since the Korean War. He looked at Maya with the same vague disappointment everyone seemed to show when they first saw her, then handed over an M4 carbine and 6 magazines. "Weapon number 8732, he droned. "You break it, you buy it. Range is hot at 0600. Don't be late." Maya checked the rifle with practiced hands. Chamber clear, bolt forward, magazine well empty. She ran through the functions check, feeling the familiar weight and balance of a weapon she'd carried through a dozen countries and twice as many firefights. The candidate behind her whistled. "Damn, Reeves, you handle that thing like you know what you're doing." She glanced back. It was a kid named Patterson, maybe 23, fresh-faced and eager despite 2 days of punishment. He grinned at her. "Looks can be deceiving," Maya said. "I'm starting to figure that out." The range was a quarter-mile from the armory. Candidates walked in silence, weapons held according to protocol, each lost in their own thoughts about the test ahead. Maya knew what was coming. Weapons qualification was standard: prone position, kneeling position, standing position, targets at various distances, score based on accuracy and time, pass-fail with no middle ground. What she didn't know was how Brennan would try to sabotage her this time. The range spread out before them like a shooting gallery from hell. 40 lanes, 40 target arrays. Instructors positioned every 10 lanes with clipboards and stopwatches and expressions that suggested they expected most candidates to fail spectacularly. Brennan stood at the range control tower, surveying his domain. When the candidates assembled, he descended like a raptor dropping on prey. "Weapons qualification," he announced, his voice carrying across the range. "This is where we separate the shooters from the flinchers. Some of you grew up hunting. Some of you qualified expert in basic. None of that matters here. What matters is whether you can put rounds on target when it counts." He walked down the line of candidates, stopped at Maya. "Reeves, you ever fired a weapon before?" "Yes, Master Sergeant." "BB gun doesn't count." "Wasn't a BB gun, Master Sergeant." Brennan's jaw tightened. "We'll see. Lane 16, move out." Maya took her assigned lane. The target array was standard. Silhouettes at 50 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters. She'd engaged targets at twice that distance in combat, but she kept her expression neutral. The candidate in the lane next to her was Hendricks. He gave her a nod. "Good luck," he said. "You too." The range master's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Candidates, load and make ready. You will have 60 seconds per position. Prone first. On my command, you will engage targets from nearest to farthest. Questions?" No one spoke. "Make ready." Maya dropped to prone position, the movement smooth and automatic. She loaded a magazine, chambered around, clicked the safety on. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to the sight picture and the targets downrange. "Commence firing." The first target was almost insultingly easy. 50 meters. Maya acquired the sight picture, exhaled halfway, squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The target dropped. Second target, 100 meters. Sight, breathe, squeeze. Another hit. She moved through the array with metronomic precision. Each shot placed exactly where she intended, each target falling in sequence. When the command came to cease fire, she'd achieved perfect score in prone position. Around her, candidates were having mixed results. Some good, some terrible. Hendricks had done well. Patterson had struggled with the 300-meter shots. But it was Maya who drew the stares. The other candidates had started to notice that the small woman they dismissed was shooting like she'd been doing it since birth. Because she had been. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 7 years old. By 12, she could outshoot most adults. By 18, she'd been competing at national levels. But she'd learned early not to advertise her skills. Better to let people underestimate you and then prove them wrong. Brennan appeared at her lane. He studied her target array through binoculars, and his expression went dark. "Lucky start," he muttered. "Let's see how you handle kneeling." Kneeling position was harder. less stable, more dependent on core strength and muscle control. Maya shifted to position, locked her left elbow against her left knee, created the proper bone support structure. The command came. She fired. Perfect score. Standing position was the hardest. No bone support, all muscles. Maya had done this in full body armor while taking fire. Doing it on a calm range with no one shooting back was almost meditative. Perfect score. When the ceasefire command came, Maya saved her weapon and stood. Around her, candidates were checking their scores. Most had passed. A few had failed and would be given one reshoot attempt. But only one candidate had achieved perfect scores in all three positions. Brennan walked to the range control tower, consulted with the other instructors, and walked back with an expression that could have curdled milk. He stopped in front of Maya. "How long you been shooting, Reeves?" "Since I was 7, Master Sergeant." "You compete?" "Yes, Master Sergeant." "What level?" "National, Master Sergeant." Brennan's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "Well, congratulations. You can shoot targets that don't shoot back. That's real impressive." He turned to address the full formation. "Some of you did well. Some of you did adequate. Some of you embarrassed yourselves in the uniform you're wearing. But this was just the warm-up." He gestured to a range instructor who wheeled out a cart covered with a tarp. Brennan pulled the tarp away, revealing a weapon that made several candidates inhale sharply. An AK-47, the Kalashnikov, weapon of choice for enemies of the United States for the past 70 years. "This," Brennan said, holding up the rifle, "is what your enemies carry, not the fancy M4s we issue, this communist piece of garbage. And if you can't pick one up and use it effectively, you're going to die the first time you need to grab enemy weapons in a firefight." He looked directly at Maya. "Reeves, front and center." Maya stepped forward. Every eye on the range was on her now. Brennan held out the AK-47. "You claim to be a shooter. Let's see you shoot this. Never mind that you've probably never touched one before. Never mind that the sights are different, the trigger pull is different, the entire manual of arms is different. You've got 90 seconds to field strip this weapon, reassemble it, and engage 3 targets at 100 meters. Clock starts when I hand you the rifle." He thrust the AK toward her. Maya took it, felt the weight, the balance, the slight forward bias from the gas piston system. She'd fired AK-47s in 6 different countries, had trained with them extensively because Delta operators needed to be proficient with enemy weapon systems. She could field strip an AK blindfolded and drunk. But Brennan didn't know that. Maya dropped the magazine, checked the chamber, clear. She found the lever for the dust cover, popped it off. The recoil spring assembly came out next, then the bolt carrier. She laid out the components in a neat line on the shooting bench. 30 seconds had elapsed. She began reassembly. Bolt carrier in, recoil spring assembly, dust cover back on with a firm slap, magazine inserted, charging handle racked, 60 seconds. She moved to firing position. The AK's sights were crude compared to the M4, but she'd used worse. She acquired the first target, fired, hit. Second target, fired, hit. Third target, fired, hit. 87 seconds total. Maya safed the weapon and set it on the bench, turned to Brennan. "Complete, Master Sergeant." The range had gone absolutely silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. Candidates stared at Maya like she just pulled a magic trick. Hendrix's mouth hung open. Brennan's face had gone through several shades of red and was settling on something close to purple. He snatched the AK off the bench, inspected it, checked the targets downrange through binoculars. When he turned back to Maya, his voice was dangerously quiet. "Where did you learn to do that?" "I've had some training, Master Sergeant." "What kind of training? What unit were you with before this?" Maya kept her face neutral. "I'm not at liberty to discuss my previous assignments, Master Sergeant." It was a careful non-answer. Brennan could interpret it however he wanted, but she hadn't violated her cover. Brennan stepped closer, close enough that most people would have backed up. Maya held her ground. You're hiding something, Reeves. I don't know what, but I'm going to find out. His voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. And when I do, I'm going to make sure you regret ever stepping foot on my range. He turned and walked away, barking orders at the other instructors. Maya stood perfectly still, processing what had just happened. Brennan wasn't just biased, he was actively hostile, and he just threatened her, however subtly. The question was whether his hostility was personal or part of something larger. Was he the saboteur, or was someone else pulling strings while he provided cover? Hendricks appeared at her elbow. Holy shit, Reeves. That was the most badass thing I've ever seen. Where the hell did you learn to handle an AK like that? Around, Maya said. Around? That's it? Come on, you can tell me. Special operations? Marine recon? What? Does it matter? Hendricks studied her face. You know what I think? I think you're not some random candidate off the street. I think you're someone important. And this whole thing is some kind of test. Maya looked at him. If I were someone important, why would I be here getting screamed at and sabotaged? That's what I can't figure out. But I'm watching you, Reeves, and I'm starting to think there's a hell of a lot more to you than meets the eye. Before Maya could respond, Brennan's voice cut across the range. Lunch break, 30 minutes. Afternoon session is hand-to-hand combat. I hope you all ate your Wheaties because you're going to need them. The candidates dispersed toward the mess hall. Maya stayed behind, checking her rifle one more time before turning it in to the armory. As she worked, she felt eyes on her. She glanced up. There, in the observation tower, stood a man she hadn't seen before. He was older, 60, maybe 65. Gray hair cut military short. He wore fatigues but no rank insignia. What caught Maya's attention was the way he stood, one leg stiff, held at a slight angle. Prosthetic, probably. And he was watching her with an intensity that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Their eyes met across the distance. The old man nodded once. A tiny gesture, almost invisible. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something with deliberate slowness, and hit send. Then he turned and disappeared into the tower. Maya frowned. Who was he? Another instructor? An observer from JSOC checking on her progress? She filed the observation away and headed to the mess hall. But the image of that old man stayed with her. Something about him was familiar. Not his face, something else. The way he carried himself despite the prosthetic. The economy of movement that spoke of decades of military discipline. She'd seen that bearing before. In old photographs, in grainy video footage her father had shown her when she was young. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Colonel James Morrison, Ironside Morrison, the man who'd served with her father in Vietnam. The man her father had talked about with a reverence reserved for the best warriors he'd ever known. The man who, according to her father's last letters home, had lost his leg at Quai Son and had saved 12 men in the process. What was he doing here? As far as Maya knew, Morrison had retired decades ago. The file on Fort Bragg's instructor corps hadn't mentioned him, but files could be incomplete, and retired colonels sometimes found their way back to training facilities, lending their experience to the next generation. Maya filed that away too. Morrison's presence complicated things, but she couldn't worry about it now. She had more immediate concerns, like surviving whatever Brennan had planned for the afternoon. The hand-to-hand combat pit was exactly what it sounded like, a depression in the ground, 30 feet by 30 feet, filled with sand that had absorbed the blood and sweat of thousands of candidates over the years. Surrounding the pit were bleachers where off-duty instructors and candidates gathered to watch. Combat training was always good entertainment, especially when someone got their ass handed to them. Brennan stood at the edge of the pit, arms crossed, looking like a man who'd just been given the keys to a torture chamber. Hand-to-hand combat, he announced. In special forces, you might find yourself without a weapon. Enemy at close range. Your training and your will to survive are all that stand between you and a shallow grave. He gestured to the pit. We're going to do full contact sparring, protective gear, but don't let that fool you. This is going to hurt. We need to see who can fight and who just talks about fighting. He scanned the assembled candidates. Reeves, you're up first. Of course she was. Maya stripped off her fatigue blouse, leaving her in a t-shirt and pants. She pulled on the protective headgear and mouthguard. Her hands were already wrapped from earlier. Your opponent, Brennan said with obvious relish, is candidate Thompson. Thompson was the biggest man in the remaining group. 6'4", 240 pounds of corn-fed Midwestern muscle. He'd played college football before joining the Army. He looked like he could bench press a Volkswagen. He looked down at Maya with something like pity. No offense, Reeves. I'll try to go easy. Maya said nothing. She stepped into the pit. The sand shifted under her feet. She found her balance, settled into a fighting stance that would look familiar to anyone who'd studied mixed martial arts. Thompson stepped in opposite her. The size difference was absurd. He outweighed her by more than 100 pounds and had a reach advantage of at least 8 inches. Brennan smiled. Begin. Thompson came forward cautiously. He wasn't trying to hurt her, not really. He was trying to tie her up, control her, maybe force a submission without doing damage. It was a mistake. Maya let him close, let him reach for her shoulders, going for the clinch. The moment his hands made contact, she moved. Her right hand snaked up, caught his left wrist, pulled him forward and down. At the same time, her left hand drove into his elbow joint, hyperextending it. Thompson's balance broke. He stumbled. Maya's foot swept his lead leg. Thompson went down hard, and she went with him, controlling the fall, transitioning to mount position before he even realized what had happened. She could have finished it there, could have rained punches on his unprotected face. But this was training, not combat. She settled for control, her knees pinning his arms, her hands ready to strike but not striking. The referee instructor called it. Submission! Winner, Reeves! Thompson lay on his back, staring up at the sky like he was trying to figure out what dimension he'd just been transported to. What the hell was that? He gasped. Maya stood and offered him a hand. He took it, and she helped pull all 240 pounds of him to his feet. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, she said. Leverage beats size. Thompson shook his head in amazement. Where'd you learn that? Around. She could feel the eyes on her now. Not just curiosity, something else. Respect, maybe, or fear. The candidates were starting to realize that Maya Reeves was not what she appeared to be. Brennan's face had gone dark again. Lucky technique. Let's see how you handle someone with actual training. Candidate Martinez, you're up. Martinez was smaller than Thompson, but moved like a fighter. He'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan as a ranger. He had the scarred knuckles and broken nose of someone who'd been in real fights. They squared up. Martinez didn't make Thompson's mistake. He kept his distance, circled, looking for openings. Maya let him work, let him think he was controlling the pace. Martinez shot in for a takedown. Low, fast, good technique. But Maya saw it coming. She sprawled, drove her hips back, stuffed the shot. Martinez tried to recover, tried to scramble to his feet. Maya's arm wrapped around his neck. Rear naked choke. She didn't squeeze hard, just enough pressure to make the point. Martinez tapped. Fight over. 2 for 2. The next opponent lasted 90 seconds before Maya caught him in an armbar, and he tapped frantically. 3 for 3. By the time Maya had defeated her 5th opponent, the mood in the pit had changed completely. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a demonstration. Maya was systematically working through every candidate Brennan threw at her, and she was making it look easy. From the bleachers, a voice called out, "Master Sergeant Brennan." Everyone turned. It was a candidate named Rodriguez. Latino, mid-20s, quiet throughout training, but solid in every evolution. Sir, with respect, candidate Reeves is following the rules. She's demonstrating superior technique. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Brennan's face went dark. Candidate Rodriguez, did I ask for commentary? No, sir, but I was taught that we speak up when we see something wrong. Rodriguez stood his ground. And punishing someone for being good at their job seems wrong, sir. Several other candidates nodded. The crowd was shifting. Maya had allies now, even if they didn't know who she really was. Brennan's jaw clenched so tight it looked like his teeth might shatter. Everyone shut up and sit down. He turned to the bleachers where instructors sat. Staff Sergeant Torres, get in the pit. A murmur ran through the crowd. Torres was an instructor, not a candidate. He was military combative certified, a veteran of special operations, and he outweighed Maya by 70 pounds of solid muscle. This wasn't training anymore. This was punishment. Torres climbed down from the bleachers. He was 30 years old, Latino from El Paso. He'd grown up being underestimated too. Wrong accent, wrong neighborhood, wrong assumptions. He'd proven himself through 2 tours in Iraq and had become one of the youngest SFAS instructors. He looked uncomfortable as he approached Maya. Reeves, I don't want to hurt you. Just put up a good fight for a minute and I'll give you an out, okay? Maya looked into his eyes, saw genuine concern there. Torres was a good man caught in a bad situation. Sergeant, she said quietly, don't hold back. I won't. Torres frowned. Reeves, I've been doing this for 10 years. And I appreciate your concern, but I'll be fine. They squared up. The referee gave the signal. Torres came in fast, using his reach and experience. He wasn't going to embarrass himself by underestimating her like the others had. It didn't matter. Maya slipped his first combination, countered with a low kick that made him wince. Torres adjusted, pressed forward, trying to use his size and strength. Maya gave ground, circled, stayed just out of reach. She was reading him. Every tell, every habit, every slight telegraph of movement that said what was coming next. Torres shot in. Good timing, good setup. But Maya had been fighting men bigger and stronger than her since she was 18. She knew every counter, every response, every way to turn size into a disadvantage. She sprawled, controlled his head, drove a knee into his ribs. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to make a point. Torres tried to scramble free. Maya transitioned to his back, sunk both hooks in, wrapped an arm around his throat. Torres had maybe 2 seconds before the choke put him out. He tapped. The pit went silent. Maya released the choke, disengaged, stood up. Torres lay on his back, breathing hard. Jesus Christ, he muttered. Where did you learn to fight like that? Maya offered him a hand. He took it. Delta Force Combatives training, she said, quiet enough that only he could hear. But that's between us, Sergeant. Torres's eyes went wide. He nodded slowly. Understood, ma'am. The honorific slipped out before he could stop it. Maya's eyes narrowed fractionally, but she said nothing. Brennan had heard. His expression went from angry to something far more dangerous. Everyone out of the pit. Training's over for today. His voice was flat, cold. Reeves, my office. Now. Maya followed Brennan across the compound to the instructor building. He didn't speak, didn't look at her, just walked with the rigid posture of a man barely containing his rage. His office was standard military. Desk, filing cabinets, photos of past training classes on the walls. A certificate of some kind in a frame. Maya glanced at it as she entered. Special Forces tab. Combat Infantryman badge. Bronze Star. Meritorious Service Medal. Brennan had been legitimate once, a real operator. Something had turned him into whatever he was now. He closed the door and rounded on her. Who the hell are you? Maya kept her expression neutral. Candidate Reeves, Master Sergeant. Bullshit. I've trained thousands of candidates. None of them handled weapons like you do. None of them fought like you do. Torres called you ma'am. Why would he do that unless you outrank him? You'd have to ask Sergeant Torres, Master Sergeant. Brennan stepped closer. You're military intelligence, aren't you? Or some kind of Inspector General investigation. That's why you're here. Someone sent you to spy on us. I'm a candidate, Master Sergeant, here to complete SFAS like everyone else. Then state your chain of command. Right now, who do you report to? Maya met his eyes. That's classified, Master Sergeant. Classified. Brennan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Know what I think? I think you're a plant. I think you're here to make us look bad. Show that women can compete with men if we just lower our standards enough. I haven't asked for special treatment, Master Sergeant. No, you've just waltzed in here with skills you shouldn't have. Training no regular candidates should possess. And you expect me to believe it's coincidence? He was close enough now that Maya could smell the coffee on his breath. You want to know what I really think? I think you're everything wrong with the new military. Diversity over competence, politics over performance, and I'm not going to let you destroy what we've built here. The threat was barely veiled. Maya processed the implications. Brennan saw her as an enemy, an existential threat to whatever worldview he'd constructed. That made him dangerous, and dangerous people did dangerous things. Master Sergeant, Maya said carefully, I'm here to complete the assessment, nothing more. We'll see about that. Brennan moved back to his desk. You're dismissed, but Reeves, watch your back. This course gets a lot harder from here. Maya left the office. As the door closed behind her, she heard Brennan pick up his phone. Yeah, it's me, he said to whoever was on the other end. We've got a problem. That candidate I mentioned, she's not who she claims to be. I need you to run deep background, military intelligence, maybe IG investigation. Find out who sent her and why. The rest was cut off by the closing door. Maya walked back toward the barracks, her mind racing. Brennan was definitely the saboteur, or connected to the saboteur. That much was clear. But there was something else going on. Something in the way he'd talked about standards and competence. Something personal driving his hatred. She thought about the two dead candidates, Lieutenant Chen, Specialist Rodriguez, both women, both killed during training. Brennan had just as good as admitted he saw capable women as threats. How far would he go to eliminate those threats? Maya reached the barracks. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Inside, candidates were nursing injuries and preparing for another night of too little sleep. Hendricks looked up when she entered. Reeves, that was incredible. I've never seen anyone fight like that. Thanks. No, seriously, you destroyed trained fighters. Torres looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Where did you learn all that? Maya sat on her bunk. Hendricks, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. He laughed. Right, of course. Classified. Everything about you is classified. Not everything, just the important parts. Hendricks grew serious. Brennan's got it in for you. You know that, right? Whatever you did to piss him off, he's going to make you pay. I know. So what are you going to do? Maya pulled out her boots and started the nightly cleaning ritual. The only thing I can do, keep going. Keep proving him wrong. And watch my back. You think he's the one who sabotaged your ruck? I'm certain of it. Then report him. Go to his superiors. This is illegal. Maya shook her head. I have no proof. A broken strap could have been coincidence. And even if I reported it, it would take weeks to investigate. The saboteur would have time to cover their tracks, or worse, to strike again. So you're just going to wait until he tries to kill you? I'm going to let him try, and when he does, I'm going to make sure he fails, and that there's enough evidence to bury him. Hendricks stared at her. You're using yourself as bait. I'm doing my job. Which is what exactly? Because I'm pretty damn sure it's not just completing SFAS. Maya buffed her boots in silence. Hendricks sighed. You know what? I don't care. I don't care if you're CIA or military intelligence or the president's secret bodyguard. You're the toughest person I've ever met, and I'm glad you're on our side. Thanks, Hendricks. Just don't get yourself killed trying to catch this asshole, okay? The army needs more people like you, not fewer. Maya smiled slightly. I'll do my best. Later that night, after lights out, Maya lay in her bunk and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow was the night navigation exercise. Miles of wilderness, solo, in the dark. The perfect opportunity for an accident. She thought about her father, about the last time she'd seen him before he deployed to Somalia. He taught her how to navigate by stars that night, in the backyard of their base housing. Maya, he'd said, you're going to face challenges in life that seem impossible. Darkness so thick you can't see your hand in front of your face. And people are going to tell you to quit, to turn back, to take the easy path. He'd pointed at the North Star. But as long as you can find that star, you can find your way home. Remember that. No matter how lost you get, there's always a way forward if you're willing to look for it. 3 months later, he was dead. But his words had stayed with her, had guided her through Ranger School, through Delta selection, through a dozen combat deployments. Tomorrow night, she'd navigate through darkness again. But this time, the enemies wouldn't be the terrain or the weather. They'd be the men who were supposed to train her. Maya closed her eyes and let sleep take her. She'd need all her strength for what was coming. Because Brennan was right about one thing. The course was about to get a lot harder. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, someone was waiting to make sure she never made it home. The briefing room smelled of stale coffee and the particular brand of anxiety that came before dangerous training exercises. Maya sat with the remaining 13 candidates, studying the topographical map projected on the screen. 15 miles of North Carolina wilderness, solo navigation, night vision goggles and a compass. No radios except for emergencies. Brennan stood at the front of the room, pointer in hand, tracing routes through the green and brown contour lines. His voice was steady, professional, the voice of an instructor who'd done this briefing 100 times. But Maya watched his eyes. They kept flicking to her, calculating, planning. Each candidate will receive a unique route, Brennan said. You'll navigate to 3 checkpoints, collect a code at each location, and return to base. Time limit is 8 hours. Anyone who fails to return or misses a checkpoint is automatically disqualified. He clicked to the next slide. The terrain is challenging. Steep grades, water crossings, dense vegetation. You'll be carrying standard field gear plus emergency supplies. This is not a race. This is about demonstrating land navigation competency under realistic conditions. Hendricks raised his hand. Master Sergeant, what about wild animals? This area has black bears, wild boar. You're armed with training weapons and flares. Use your judgment. The goal is to avoid wildlife encounters, not engage them. Brennan's expression was neutral. Any other questions? Silence. Good. Route assignments will be distributed at 2000 hours. Movement begins at 2100. Dismissed. The candidates filed out. Maya stayed behind, studying the map. Her eyes traced the terrain features. Ridgelines, valleys, water sources. She memorized it all, committing the landscape to the 3-dimensional map in her mind that she'd built over years of operating in unfamiliar territory. Reeves! She turned. Brennan stood 5 feet away. In his hand was a manila envelope. Your route assignment, he said. Maya took the envelope. Heavier than the others she'd seen distributed. She opened it. The route was brutal. 15 miles that would cross some of the most difficult terrain on the base. 2 ridge climbs that would require technical scrambling. A water crossing at a point where the creek was known to run fast and deep. And the final checkpoint was positioned at the edge of a cliff face that had been marked off limits for training because of rockfall hazards. Maya looked up at Brennan. This route crosses restricted terrain. Special permission granted for this exercise. His smile was cold. I'm sure someone with your skills can handle it. She could refuse, could point out that this route was unnecessarily dangerous. But that would be admitting fear, and Maya Reeves didn't admit fear. Understood, Master Sergeant. Good. One more thing. Brennan stepped closer. I spoke to some contacts at other bases, asked around about any candidates named Reeves with your particular skill set. Know what I found? Maya's expression remained neutral. Nothing. No record of anyone matching your description in any of the conventional units. No marksmanship competitions with your name. No combatives tournaments. His eyes bored into hers. It's like you don't exist outside this training course. Perhaps you're looking in the wrong places, Master Sergeant. Or perhaps you're exactly what I think you are, a ghost sent here to undermine everything we've built. He held her gaze for a long moment. Funny thing about ghosts, though, they tend to disappear when you shine a light on them. And tonight, Reeves, you're going to be all alone in the dark. The threat was explicit now. Maya absorbed it, filed it away. I'll see you in 8 hours, Master Sergeant. She walked out of the briefing room. Behind her, she heard Brennan make another phone call. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. Something was happening tonight. Something beyond a routine navigation exercise. Maya returned to the barracks and began her preparations. She laid out her gear with meticulous care. Compass, map, night vision goggles, water, energy bars, first aid kit, knife, emergency radio. She checked every piece of equipment twice, looked for signs of tampering. The night vision goggles had fresh batteries. The compass was accurate. The map matched her route. But when she tested her emergency radio, she got nothing but static. She checked the battery. Fresh. Checked the antenna. Intact. The radio should work, but it didn't. Sabotage number 3. Maya considered reporting it, demanding a replacement. But that would tip her hand. Let Brennan know she was onto him. Instead, she pocketed the broken radio and pulled out her personal GPS unit from her locked footlocker. It was civilian grade, not military issue, but it would work if things went completely sideways. She also pulled out something else, a small body camera, no bigger than a button. JSOC issue, recording everything she saw and heard. She'd been wearing it since day one, hidden in her uniform. Tonight, whatever happened in those woods would be documented. Hendricks appeared at her bunk. Hey, Reeves. You get your route yet? Yeah. Where are they sending you? Maya showed him the map. His eyes widened. Jesus Christ, that's insane. Half that route is marked restricted for safety reasons. He looked at her. This is Brennan, isn't it? He's trying to get you killed. He's trying to make me quit. Same difference in terrain like that. Hendricks shook his head. You should report this. Go over his head. This is criminal. And say what? That the training is too hard? That's exactly what he expects. So you're just going to go out there and risk your life to prove a point? Maya finished packing her gear. I'm going to complete my mission. That's what soldiers do. Soldiers also know when to call for backup. I've got backup. She tapped the hidden camera. Everything that happens tonight gets recorded. If Brennan tries anything, it'll be documented. Hendricks looked like he wanted to argue further, but recognized the futility. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't one. He sighed. Look, I know you can't tell me what you really are or why you're really here, but whatever it is, it must be damn important for you to risk this. Maya thought about Lieutenant Chen and Specialist Rodriguez, about their families who'd been told it was just an accident, about every other woman who would come through this course and face the same bias, the same sabotage. It is, she said quietly. 2,100 hours came fast. The candidates assembled at the edge of the training area, each with their route and equipment. An instructor checked them off one by one, verifying they had all required gear. When he reached Maya, he gave her equipment a cursory glance and waved her through. Didn't check her radio. Didn't verify her emergency supplies. More evidence of complicity. How many instructors were part of this? Maya moved to the start line. Brennan stood there, clipboard in hand. Candidate Reeves, ready to begin? Yes, Master Sergeant. Remember, 8 hours. Miss a checkpoint or exceed the time limit, you're done. He paused. Good luck. You're going to need it. Maya adjusted her night vision goggles and stepped into the darkness. The forest swallowed her whole. For the first hour, the navigation was straightforward. Maya moved through the trees with practiced efficiency, using terrain features and her compass to maintain her heading. The night vision goggles turned the world into shades of green and black, but she'd operated in worse conditions. Checkpoint 1 was positioned at a stream crossing. Maya found it exactly where her map indicated, collected the code from the waterproof container, and continued. The second hour brought the first ridge climb, steep, rocky, requiring her to use her hands as much as her feet. She moved carefully, testing each handhold before committing her weight. Halfway up, she found something that made her blood run cold. Trail markers. Orange reflective tape on trees, marking a route up the ridge. But the markers led directly toward a section of cliff face that was unstable. A fall from there would mean serious injury at best, death at worst. Maya pulled out her map and compared it to the terrain. The safe route up the ridge was 50 meters to the east, but the trail markers deliberately led candidates toward the dangerous section. Someone had moved the markers. Recently, the tape was fresh, not weathered by sun and rain. This was the sabotage. This was how Lieutenant Chen and Specialist Rodriguez had died. Maya pulled out her personal GPS unit and marked the location. Then she carefully removed the false trail markers, folding them into her pocket. Evidence. She took the safe route up the ridge. At the top, she paused to catch her breath and scan the terrain ahead. In the distance, she saw a faint glow. Flashlight, maybe. Or night vision goggles reflecting starlight. Someone else was out here. Maya's hand moved to the knife on her belt. She wasn't armed with a real weapon, but she knew 100 ways to defend herself if it came to that. She hoped it wouldn't. Moving more cautiously now, Maya navigated toward checkpoint 2. The terrain grew more difficult. Dense vegetation, deadfall logs, marshy ground that sucked at her boots. And all around her, the sounds of the forest at night. Owl calls, rustling in the underbrush, the distant sound of water running over rocks. She reached checkpoint 2 and froze. The checkpoint container had been moved. It should have been attached to a tree at eye level. Instead, it was lying on the ground 15 feet away, positioned right at the edge of a concealed sinkhole. Maya could see the depression in the earth, covered by a thin layer of branches and leaves. Someone stepping on it would fall through, drop 8 or 10 feet into a pit that could easily break an ankle or leg. And out here, alone, with a broken radio, that would be a death sentence. Maya photographed the scene with her body camera, narrating quietly. Checkpoint 2. Container has been deliberately repositioned to lure candidates into a concealed hazard. This is attempted murder. She retrieved the code without triggering the trap and continued toward the final checkpoint. The forest grew darker. Clouds had moved in, obscuring the moon and stars. Maya relied entirely on her night vision goggles now, moving carefully through terrain that seemed to grow more hostile with every step. She was 3 miles from the final checkpoint when she heard it. Footsteps, heavy, moving fast, coming from her 6 o'clock. Maya dove behind a fallen log and went still. Through her night vision goggles, she watched a figure emerge from the tree line. It was a man, large, moving with military precision. He wore night vision goggles and carried what looked like a training rifle, but Maya couldn't be certain it wasn't loaded with live ammunition. The figure stopped 20 feet from her position, swept the area with his weapon. "I know you're out here, Reeves," a voice called out, Brennan's voice. "Figured you were too smart for the traps. That's fine. We'll do this the old-fashioned way." Maya's mind raced. Brennan had followed her into the woods, was actively hunting her. This had gone far beyond training or sabotage. This was attempted murder. "You should have quit when you had the chance," Brennan continued. "Should have realized you don't belong here, but you had to prove a point. Had to show everyone that women are just as good as men." He moved closer. Maya could hear his boots crushing dead leaves. My son believed that. Believed the diversity bullshit. Believed that his team leader was qualified, even though she'd been pushed through training to meet quotas. And you know what happened? Brennan's voice cracked. She got him killed. Made a bad call in a firefight. My boy died because the Army cares more about politics than competence. So that was it. The source of his hatred. His son had died in combat, and he'd blamed the first female officer he could find. I'm not going to let it happen again, Brennan said. I'm not going to watch more people die because we lowered our standards, even if I have to stop you myself. He was 15 feet away now. Maya calculated her options. She could try to evade, but he knew the terrain better than she did. She could confront him, but he was armed and she wasn't. Or she could do what she did best. Turn his assumptions against him. Maya stood up from behind the log. Brennan spun toward her, weapon raised. There you are. Master Sergeant Brennan, Maya said calmly. You need to lower your weapon. You're violating about a dozen regulations right now. He laughed. Regulations? You think I care about regulations? I care about keeping standards, about making sure people like you don't get real soldiers killed. People like me, Maya repeated. You mean women? Or do you mean qualified operators who threaten your worldview? I mean ghosts who show up with skills they shouldn't have and try to undermine everything we've built here. He stepped closer. But ghosts can disappear, and out here, in the dark, accidents happen. Just ask those two candidates last cycle. You killed them. I removed unqualified personnel before they could do damage in the field. No hesitation, no remorse. Same thing I'm going to do to you. He raised the rifle. Maya tensed, ready to move. A voice cut through the darkness. Sergeant Brennan, lower your weapon. Both Maya and Brennan turned. From the tree line emerged another figure, older, moving with the careful gait of someone compensating for a prosthetic leg. Colonel James Morrison. He limped toward them, and in the green glow of the night vision goggles, Maya could see he was armed. Not with a training weapon, with a sidearm, a real one. Colonel Morrison, Brennan said, Sir, this doesn't concern you. I'm handling a security situation. By threatening a candidate with a weapon? That's not handling a security situation, Cole. That's committing murder. Morrison's voice was hard. Command voice. The voice of a man who'd led soldiers through hell and expected to be obeyed. Lower your weapon. Brennan hesitated. The rifle wavered. She's not a candidate, sir. She's some kind of plant, intelligence, inspector general, something, and she's trying to destroy our program. I know exactly who she is, Morrison said quietly. Do you? Some diversity hire trying to prove a point. She's Captain Maya Reeves, Delta Force, JSOC Special Programs Director, 47 combat missions, Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor. Morrison's voice carried absolute certainty. And she's here on orders from the Secretary of Defense to investigate the deaths of 2 candidates who were murdered during training. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. Brennan's rifle lowered slightly. That's impossible. She's too young, too small. There's no way. Her father was Master Sergeant James Reeves, 75th Rangers, my best friend, killed in Mogadishu in 1993. Morrison's voice softened. I watched Jimmy train. I saw what dedication looked like. And I'm looking at Jimmy Reeves all over again. Same eyes, same determination, same refusal to quit. Maya stared at Morrison. He'd known. The entire time he'd known who she was. Sir, Brennan said desperately, even if that's true, it doesn't change what's happening to our military. Standards are falling. Women are being pushed through who can't handle. Captain Reeves just completed a 15-mile night navigation through terrain I wouldn't send a ranger platoon through. Morrison cut him off. She avoided every trap you set, found every piece of sabotage, and she did it while carrying a broken radio and knowing someone was trying to kill her. He stepped closer to Brennan. "Tell me, Sergeant, how many of your male candidates could have done the same?" Brennan had no answer. Morrison's hand moved to his sidearm, not drawing it, just resting on it. "You have two choices, Cole. You can lower that weapon and submit to arrest, or you can force my hand, and I'll put you down like the traitor you become." "I'm not a traitor," Brennan said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "I'm trying to save lives, to maintain standards. My son—" "Your son died because of bad intelligence, not bad leadership," Morrison said. "I read the after-action report. I knew his team leader. She was qualified. She made the best call she could with the information she had. But you needed someone to blame. So you blamed her because she was female." Brennan's hands were shaking now. The rifle barrel dipped toward the ground. "Two candidates are dead because of your prejudice," Morrison continued relentlessly. "How many more were you planning to kill? 5? 10? Where does it end, Cole?" "When standards are restored. When we stop letting politics dictate who gets to call themselves warriors." "Captain Reeves is more warrior than you or I ever were," Morrison said flatly. "And if you can't see that, then you're blind. Now lower the weapon before I make you." For a long moment, Brennan stood frozen. Then slowly he lowered the rifle, let it hang from its sling. His shoulders slumped. "I just wanted to save lives," he said quietly. "I didn't want anyone else to lose their son the way I lost mine." "Then you should have focused on better training and better intelligence," Morrison said, "not murdering candidates who had the audacity to be female and competent." He moved forward and took Brennan's rifle, handed it to Maya. Then he pulled out zip-tie restraints and secured Brennan's hands. "Sergeant Cole Brennan, you're under arrest for the murder of two candidates, attempted murder of Captain Reeves, and violations of Article 118 and 119 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." Morrison keyed his radio. "Base, this is Morrison. I have a code red. Need MP and CID response at grid November Kilo 4719. One suspect in custody. Repeat, one suspect in custody for homicide." The response was immediate. "Units moving. Help on the way." Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. The digital recorder that had been part of her kit. "3 weeks ago, Master Sergeant Brennan, you had a conversation with Staff Sergeant Chen in the instructor lounge. Let me refresh your memory." She pressed play. Brennan's voice crackled through the speaker. "These diversity quotas are destroying unit cohesion. Women don't belong in combat leadership. Someone's going to get killed, and when they do, everyone's going to pretend they didn't see it coming." Chen's voice. "Cole, you can't say that out loud." Brennan. "I'll say whatever I want, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect real warriors from this political bullshit." Maya stopped the recording. "That device was placed by CID as part of this investigation. You've been under surveillance since the second candidate died." Brennan's face went from red to ashen. That was private." "Nothing is private when you're under investigation for murder, Sergeant." Morrison turned to Maya. Even in the darkness, she could see the weight in his eyes. "Captain Reeves, I owe you an apology. Several, actually." "Sir?" "I knew who you were from the moment you arrived. Recognized you from pictures Jimmy sent me before he deployed. You have his eyes." Morrison's voice roughened. "I should have protected you. Should have stopped this before Brennan escalated. But I was frozen, afraid, haunted by my own failures." "I don't understand, sir." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, the words came hard. 10 years ago, when I was still active duty, I commanded a training facility in Georgia. We had a female lieutenant, brilliant officer, outstanding potential, and she was being harassed by her superior, sexually, professionally, every way possible. He looked at the ground. She came to me, asked for help, and I didn't act. Told her to handle it through proper channels. told her not to make waves, because I was afraid of the political fallout, afraid of being accused of favoritism or special treatment. Maya could see where this was going. 2 weeks later, she killed herself, Morrison said, left a note detailing everything, the harassment, the retaliation when she tried to report it, and my failure to help when she'd asked. He looked up at Maya. I retired 6 months later, couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore, couldn't lead when I knew I'd failed the one person who trusted me to do the right thing. His hand moved to his prosthetic leg. Lost this at Quezon, saving 12 men. Thought that made me a hero, but letting that lieutenant die made me a coward. Sir, you couldn't have known. I should have known. Jimmy would have known. He always knew when someone needed help. Always acted, damn the consequences. Morrison's eyes held hers. When you showed up here, I saw a chance at redemption. A chance to do what I should have done 10 years ago. But I was paralyzed again. Watched Brennan sabotage your equipment. Watched him set traps. And I did nothing. But you're here now, Maya said quietly. Only because I couldn't live with another death on my conscience. Morrison straightened. Captain, I'm recommending myself for court-martial for dereliction of duty. I knew about the sabotage and failed to act. That makes me complicit. Maya studied the old colonel, saw the guilt eating at him, the weight of failure and shame. She thought about her father, about the stories he'd told of Morrison, how Ironside had carried wounded men through a kill zone, how he'd held a position for 6 hours against overwhelming odds, how he'd lost his leg saving soldiers under his command. Colonel Morrison, she said formally, with respect, I don't think a court-martial is appropriate. Captain, I failed in my duty. You recognized a wrong and took action to correct it. You stopped an active threat. You likely saved my life tonight. Maya held his gaze. JSOC didn't just send me here to find a saboteur, sir. They sent me to find the next chief instructor for this facility. Someone with the experience, the wisdom, and the courage to ensure this never happens again. Morrison stared at her. You can't be serious. Maya pulled an envelope from her pocket. Orders, signed by the Secretary of Defense, appointing Colonel Morrison as SFAS Commandant, pending the successful completion of her investigation. I'm very serious, sir. This facility needs leadership that understands both the importance of standards and the importance of fairness. Someone who's made mistakes and learned from them. Someone who won't let bias override competence. Captain, I'm 62 years old with one leg and a decade of guilt. My father trusted you with his life, sir. I'm trusting you with this. Maya held out the envelope. Teach them what you taught him. Skill, honor, the courage to judge warriors by their actions, not their appearance. Morrison took the envelope with shaking hands. Opened it. Read the orders. In the distance, sirens wailed. Military police responding to Morrison's call. Brennan stood silent between them, face hollow with the realization of what he'd become. What happens to him? Morrison asked. Court-martial, prison, dishonorable discharge. Maya's voice was hard. He murdered 2 people and tried to murder me. There's no redemption for that. Brennan didn't protest, just stood there, broken. The MPs arrived in a convoy of vehicles, lights flashing. CID investigators poured out, began processing the scene. Maya handed over her body camera footage, the evidence of Brennan's sabotage, his confession, the audio recording, everything. A young lieutenant approached Maya. Ma'am, we need to get you back to base. Medical evaluation, debriefing. I need to complete my navigation course, Maya said. The lieutenant blinked. Ma'am, given the circumstances, I need to complete my navigation course, Maya repeated. I have one more checkpoint and I'm within my time limit. If I don't finish, Brennan wins. He gets to claim I couldn't handle the real challenge. Morrison stepped forward. Captain, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Not anymore. It's not about proving anything, sir. It's about finishing what I started. Maya checked her compass. The final checkpoint is 2 miles north. I can make it in 90 minutes and still be back before the 8-hour limit. Morrison studied her face, saw the same stubborn determination he'd seen in her father. Then you'd better move out, Captain. Don't be late. Maya nodded and disappeared into the forest. She ran the last 2 miles, ran like her father had taught her, ran like she'd run through a dozen combat zones, ran because forward was the only direction that mattered. The final checkpoint sat at the edge of the cliff face, exactly where Brennan had positioned it. But Maya approached from above, using the safe route she'd mapped earlier. She collected the code, photographed the hazardous placement for the investigation, and started back toward base. She arrived at the finish line in 7 hours and 43 minutes, 17 minutes under the limit. A crowd had gathered. Candidates, instructors. Word had spread about what happened in the woods, about Brennan's arrest, about who Maya really was. They stood at attention as she crossed the finish line. Morrison was waiting. He saluted. "Captain Reeves, welcome back." Maya returned the salute. "Mission complete, sir." "Indeed it is." Morrison's eyes held pride. "Your father would be proud." Maya felt something break inside her chest. The wall she'd built to keep emotion at bay, to stay professional and focused and controlled. It crumbled under the weight of those 5 words. Your father would be proud. She'd spent 22 years trying to live up to his legacy, trying to prove she was worthy of his name. And here, at the end of the hardest mission she'd ever undertaken, a man who'd known him better than almost anyone was telling her she'd succeeded. "Thank you, sir," she managed. Brennan was being loaded into an MP vehicle. He looked at Maya one last time as the door closed. Not with hatred anymore, just exhaustion and defeat. "Wait," Maya said. The MPs paused. Maya approached Brennan. "You asked me on day 1 to state my chain of command," she said quietly. Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who'd earned the right to command. She let the silence hang for 3 seconds. "You're looking at the top of it." The words landed like a physical blow. Brennan's face went white. He nodded once, slowly, and the MPs closed the door. Morrison stepped closer, lowered his voice. "I failed you, Maya. Failed your father's memory by not protecting you the way I should have. But I promise you that failure ends today. I'm accepting this position. And I'm going to make damn sure that every warrior who comes through this course is judged by their skill, not their skin or gender or appearance. That's all I ask, sir." "Good." Morrison squeezed her shoulder once and released. "Now get some rest. You've earned it." As Maya walked toward her vehicle, she passed the memorial wall. Photos of every soldier who'd graduated SFAS over the decades. Thousands of faces. Thousands of warriors who'd earned their place among the elite. Soon, there would be new photos, new faces. Women who'd proven themselves not because standards were lowered, but because they were high enough to be worth achieving. Maya thought about Lieutenant Sarah Chen and Specialist Amanda Rodriguez, whose photos would never hang on that wall, who'd been denied their chance by a man too broken by grief to see clearly. She made them a silent promise that their deaths wouldn't be forgotten, that the changes made here would honor their memory, that no one else would die because of prejudice masquerading as standards. 1 year later, Maya stood in front of a packed auditorium at Fort Bragg. Behind her, a screen displayed the photos of the 2 candidates who died, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Specialist Amanda Rodriguez. "These women," Maya said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through, "didn't die in combat. They didn't die defending our nation from enemies abroad. They died right here, on American soil, killed by the very system that promised to train them." The audience was silent. Families of the fallen, current SFAS candidates, senior military leadership. Morrison sat in the front row, his uniform pressed to perfection. But their deaths weren't meaningless. Maya gestured to the front row where 16 newly minted Special Forces operators sat. 6 were women. Because of them, These warriors graduated SFAS this year, not because standards were lowered, because bias was removed. She paused. Lieutenant Chen's sister is now in Ranger School. Specialist Rodriguez's best friend just completed Delta selection. Maya's eyes found Morrison in the crowd. He nodded, understanding. Warriors come in every size, every gender, every background. My father taught me that. Colonel Morrison proved it. And these two women died believing it. We owe them more than remembrance. We owe them action. Every single day we choose to see warriors for who they are, not what they look like. Maya saluted the photos. Lieutenant Chen, Specialist Rodriguez, mission complete. We'll take it from here. The entire auditorium rose to their feet, not applauding, standing in silent respect for two warriors who'd paid the ultimate price. Outside, after the ceremony, Morrison found her. There's someone who wants to meet you, he said. A young woman approached, 20 years old, fit, determined eyes. She wore army fatigues. Captain Reeves, I'm Emily Brennan. Maya studied her carefully. Cole Brennan's daughter. I know who my father was, Emily said quickly. What he did, what he believed. She took a breath. I spent my whole life thinking I wasn't good enough because I was a woman, that I'd never measure up to what he wanted. Emily's reapplying to Ranger School, Morrison interjected. She failed Mountain Phase the first time, but she's going back. I read the reports about what happened, Emily continued. About you, about what you accomplished. She met Maya's eyes. My father was wrong, and I'm going to prove it, not to him, to myself. Maya saw the determination there, the same fire that had driven her through 18 months of combat and 6 weeks of hell at Fort Bragg. You'll make it, Maya said, not because you're Cole Brennan's daughter, because you're Emily Brennan, and that's enough. Emily's eyes shone with tears she refused to let fall. Thank you, ma'am. As she walked away, Morrison spoke quietly. Her father's in Leavenworth, 25 to life, but she visits him every month, trying to help him understand what he couldn't see before. Is it working? Slowly. He'll never be the man he was, but maybe he'll become someone better. Morrison paused. Redemption is possible, even for the broken. 18 months after the ceremony, Maya was back in Afghanistan when she got the message. Morrison had successfully graduated his first SFAS class under the new protocols. 16 soldiers earned their Special Forces tab. 6 were women. All 16 met the same standards. All 16 were warriors. And Emily Brennan had just completed Ranger School after 2 attempts. Top 10% of her class. Maya read the message twice, then showed it to Rodriguez, who was cleaning his rifle next to her. Your old instructor's daughter made Ranger, she said. Rodriguez whistled. Damn, that's something. Her father tried to kill you, and now she's following in your footsteps. Not my footsteps, her own path. Maya smiled. That's how it should be. The mission brief came through on her tablet. Another village to clear. Another group of hostages to extract. Another impossible situation that needed warriors willing to stand when others fell. Maya checked her gear, loaded her magazines, ran through her mental checklist the same way she'd done 1,000 times before. Somewhere back in the States, Morrison was training the next generation, teaching them that warriors came in all shapes and sizes, that competence had no gender, that the only thing that mattered was the will to fight when fighting was necessary. Somewhere, Emily Brennan was beginning her career as a ranger, carrying both her father's legacy and her own determination to prove that redemption was possible, even for the children of broken men. And somewhere, in a military prison, Cole Brennan sat in a cell and thought about the son he'd lost, and the warriors he'd murdered, and the price of letting grief become hatred. But Maya didn't think about any of that as she loaded into the helicopter. She thought about her father, about the last lesson he'd taught her. That being a warrior wasn't about size or strength or gender. It was about standing, about fighting, about refusing to quit when quitting was the easier path. She'd stood, she'd fought, she'd won. And now, as the helicopter lifted off into the Afghan night, she was going to do it all over again. Because that's what warriors did. They stood when others fell. The helicopter banked toward the target. Maya checked her weapon one last time and smiled. Her father would have been proud, and that was enough.